Welcome to the Doctors Making a Difference podcast, where we help physicians to be empowered with the tools they need to be successful in medicine, in finance, and in life. Join us as we highlight doctors and other professionals around the world who are making a difference. Doctors change lives every day, but what happens when life changes yours? A single injury, a sudden illness, your career, your income, your future can shift in an instant. The best physicians don't just plan for success, they protect it. At Set for Life Insurance, they believe financial security isn't a luxury, it's a necessity. True own occupation disability insurance ensures that no matter what happens, your future stays in your hands. Because protecting your income means protecting everything you've built. Visit drpodcastnetwork.co/set for life today. Secure your future before life makes the choice for you. Think about the opportunity to work as a board-certified child and adolescent psychiatrist. Today, we get the opportunity to hear about Eric Arzubi. Interestingly, he spent years in the financial industry and was a writer for Bloomberg, and has had a lot of opportunities to do other things before entering medicine, and has had a fascinating career. Dr. Arzubi, Eric, would you mind introducing yourself to our audience today?
Sure, thanks. And can I call you Peter? Is that okay?
Oh, please do. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, that's great to be here, and thanks for the invitation. So yeah, my name is Eric. I'm a board-certified general psychiatrist as well as specialty trained child and adolescent psychiatrist. I'm based in Billings, Montana, and right now I'm co-founder, and CEO of Frontier Psychiatry. It's an all telehealth practice that delivers psychiatric care and addiction medicine to Montana, Idaho, and Alaska.
Pretty neat. So you serve people, hundreds of thousands of people potentially across all those different areas. Kind of walk me through your career a little bit. I want to hear how it started and then how it's transitioned into this kind of focus where it sounds like you still work with the Yale Child Psychiatry
the Child
Center.
Study Center.
Yeah. And then you've transitioned it from kind of boots on the ground right there in Montana practice to also going out and doing this telemedicine stuff. I'd like to hear that transition process.
Sure. No, thanks. Yeah. Thanks for letting me talk about that. So I went in college, I studied sort of international affairs. I thought I wanted to be like my uncle. So my family's originally from Argentina. My uncle is a successful finance guy and worked out of Buenos Aires, Argentina. And so I'm like, I want to be like him. I want to travel the world and make a lot of money. And so I studied international affairs in DC. I actually moved to Argentina right after graduating in 1991. And a few months after starting to work for him, he fired me. I went chasing after a girlfriend I left back in DC. It was just a dumb move. And he was right to fire me. He's like, Eric, I love you like a son, but I got to fire you. You just took off and didn't tell me where you're going. I'm like, no, it makes sense. But by then, I asked if I could go back. We broke up. I broke up with his girlfriend. I went back to Argentina, and he said, you can keep living with me. You can figure out what you want to do with yourself. I'm like, okay. So I had made some contacts, interestingly already, and that's a longer story. But I ended up getting hired to be Bloomberg News' first Latin American correspondent. So I worked out of Argentina, writing stories for Bloomberg, doing financial and economics reporting. Did that for almost 2 years. And then I decided to move back to the United States and ended up working a couple of temp jobs in New York City in a couple of finance, like a couple of Mexican brokerages, actually. And my resume got around to a hedge fund. Worked as a hedge fund analyst for less than a year and eventually ended up as a bond trader at Morgan Stanley, out of their offices in Times Square, and was on a big trading floor and bought and sold Latin American bonds. So I did that until 1999. And for a couple of years before 1999, I had really been wondering about what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. I was looking around for role models, met a lot of brilliant, really wonderful, brilliant people in both news as well as Wall Street, but nobody who ended up being a role model who I wanted to be like when I was 60, 70 years old. And the person I kept thinking about was my pediatrician who took care of me when I was growing up in Vermont. And so I had this pediatrician from the time I was 9 months old until he fired me when I was 24. And he's like, Eric, you don't need to see me anymore.
You're not a pediatric patient anymore at that point.
Yeah, exactly. But he was just awesome. And I just always really looked up to him. Even when he retired, he ended up doing a lot of community service still, serving on local boards. I mean, this guy was just wonderful. So in the 90s, I went back to visit him a couple of times just to talk about life and career. And at some point, I decided, I think I want to try to be a doctor. I mean, I always loved math and science. I enjoyed interacting with others and wanted to do something that was meaningful. And I was making good money in New York, but I didn't feel that work was meaningful. At the end of the day, I was just kind of buying and selling these financial instruments and didn't get meaning out of it. So a lot of people thought I was nuts. I went back to pre-med. So I did pre-med classes, did that in New York City, and then eventually applied to med school and ended up at Yale doing med school, psychiatry residency, and fellowship. Now, I think an important sort of milestone there is about 9 months into my transition from Wall Street to pre-med, I uncovered or got triggered in that transition, massive anxiety. Like it got to the point it was crippling. I couldn't sleep. And I don't know if it was kind of the change in my identity from being a bond trader to being a student again at age 30.
Yeah, it was a huge transition because you were right up there in the. I mean, you were set on a really successful career path from a finance standpoint.
Yeah, no, I mean, I still don't make. I never have as a doctor, even though since I finished my training in 2013, made what I made back in 1998, and I may never. And now I'm sitting with that, and that's okay. But that transition is hard. My identity was I was a VP at Morgan Stanley and a bond trader, and then went to doing physics homework.
Right.
It was just
well,
odd, right?
And you were not age matched with a lot of your peers. You're probably a decade older than a lot of them.
That's exactly right. And I felt this, even though I loved the sciences, I felt this incredible pressure because I just left what for many people is a dream job. And so I was imagining what happens if I fail? What if I don't make it to med school? How's that going to look? Again, I was younger at the time, and now that doesn't really matter much to me. But at the time, I was like, what are people going to say? All the people that I left behind on Wall Street, they think this is silly. I want to prove to them that it's not. And then I think the pressure I was putting myself to try to be perfect, and and to get into good med school, they expect the admissions office expect you to be perfect, which nobody is, and so it was really a ton of pressure, and so yeah, I ended up really uncovering pretty bad anxiety in the fall of 1999. Had to take a semester off because I really had to stop functioning. I wasn't sleeping. I couldn't focus because of the anxiety. I was spiraling, and so that was an interesting part of my journey, which I got to believe in some way informed my decision to later become a psychiatrist. And the other thing is, I'd saved some money, so that helped me pay for, my pre-med. And pre-med took about, 2 years to try to get through all the pre-med classes and apply and all that stuff. So I was able to live off that money for a couple of years, but I had to start making money again. And so I started doing a lot of tutoring, math and science tutoring. And I think that also informed my ultimate decision to become a child psychiatrist, because I ended up spending thousands of hours with middle school and high school kids tutoring math, science, and then eventually just kind of general education, and really loved spending time with those kids and the families. And so I think ultimately probably my own experience with anxiety and the time I spent, the thousands of hours tutoring kids and spending time with families, I think really informed my decision to become a child psychiatrist. And so that's, and not to mention the time with my pediatrician. So eventually, yeah, I did child psychiatry fellowship at Yale and finished in 2013. And so, like many of us, by then I had lots of loans, lots of student debt, and by then also I was married and had 2 daughters, and so I had to make some decisions, right? So I was living in Connecticut. Connecticut's really expensive. It's densely populated. I also wanted my daughters to grow up in a place that, was more like my Vermont when I grew up. I wanted them to kind of have, a little more space, a little less kind of pressure. And so I got this random email from a place called Billings Clinic in Billings, Montana, looking for a child psychiatrist. I answered it. I ended up going to Montana for an interview. I'd never been there before. And my wife and I had said, gosh, wouldn't it be cool to go to a place that's pretty, that was growing up. And so we ended up there. I ended up starting my first job as a psychiatrist, full-time doctor at age 44. And that was in 2013.
Man, Eric, this is
So,
such a unique
yeah.
story. I don't know anybody who's had this path because, I mean, I've known people who've transitioned from one career to the next, but this is so unique because you were kind of, I mean, you were walking the high life in finance and kind of in things that would be like name recognized brands, and then you transitioned back to tutoring middle schoolers and working in school and taking on student debt, and you moved from the East Coast, the big city life to beautiful mountainous Montana. I mean, I love Montana. I'm from Idaho, so I think Montana is amazing. But what a transition! Holy cow!
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I thrive on these bizarre shifts. Maybe I get bored easy. I don't know, or maybe I like risk. Maybe I like risk. Maybe that's why I was a trader, and then I ended up doing these other things, right? But um, I guess you're right. But also, it was a long period of searching. I think one of the things that drove me too was I felt, I feel very blessed. I mean, I work hard and I was able to do well in school, and so I feel like I was pretty good at a lot of different things, but I wasn't great at anything. I did, it's kind of one of those classic things, jack of all trades, master of none, and I think I was searching for something that was mine. Like, so when I was a bond trader, I was okay. I was never going to be the one of the top hedge fund people in the world. I just that wasn't my gift, and I knew that, and I didn't care about it enough to make it my gift, if that makes sense. And so I kept poking around. I mean, same thing as being a reporter. I was a decent reporter. I was never going to be a Pulitzer Prize winning reporter, but I was okay. And I guess I got really scared of being just okay. And I wanted to be really great at something, and I wanted to find what that was. And so maybe that's why I pushed myself to keep looking until I found something that really resonated and something I felt I could stick to. And the fact, look, here I am. It's 2025. I'm 56, and I'm still doing this. So I must have found it. I think. I
I think
hope.
so. No, I think you have. I mean, I'm kind of inspired by this story because you found something that would work great. You'd had financial tools. You would have been able to take care of your family. It would have been a fine life. But you needed something that inspired you, and you only get to live once, right? And so if you feel like you're not matching that expectation, and you have all these gifts. I mean, how cool that you actually did it. People talk about that stuff, but you did it. I love it. That's so cool.
Well, no, I appreciate it. And it goes to the like, and I don't know if I give myself. I mean, I know what you're saying, and I do appreciate it. But I think what drove me. Yes, I can sit here and say, well, I was so inspired in the passion and all that, sure. But I was also terrified of being stuck in something that I would look back on and be like, dude, that was your one shot at life, like you said, and you did that. Like like that was too hard to sit with, and so I think that massive discomfort of being in that position kept pushing me. I'd rather be taking these risks than be 7 years old, if God bless God bless me if I make it that to that age, but be sitting there at 70 or whatever 80 and sitting there going, damn it, I could have been a doctor, but I sat there and bought and sold bonds for a living. Or I could have done these other things, and I decided to just stick with that first job as a reporter. And so I think that discomfort and that terrified me, I think, and pushed me to do these other terrifying things, I guess.
Yeah. Well, we're all given different gifts. And like, you've got kids, I've got kids. We talk about it all the time with my kids to say like, well, try to find what you're passionate about, what you want to do, what you can do to do some good in the world. And maybe I kind of feel like we live in a time where culture wants us to celebrate mediocrity. And I don't mind, saying like we're all a work in progress and we're in process. But it's great to say I don't have to be good at everything, but there's a few things that I did my very best at. I can excel
Yes.
and be my very best version of that. And if you didn't feel like you were there, and if you don't feel like you're there now for any of us, it's a good opportunity to reflect, because the one thing you never get more of is time. And if there's something you want to take on and say this is the time to do it, you just got to do it.
I totally agree. And it's now I think the new kind of little monster under the bed for me is, and something we talked about kind of before we went on air is like that we have this like mental health crisis nationally, and in particular in kind of rural communities, which I didn't realize when I moved to Montana. When I moved to Montana, I'm like, oh, this is cute. I'll be in a beautiful state. It's got, a lot of cool things. It'll be gorgeous, great. And I get here, and I at that point, again, I was a new doctor and wasn't thinking about all the big picture kind of public health implications of where you live and the social determinants of health, and realizing that, shoot, I was in a state that had sat in the top 3 highest suicide rates in the country for 40 years. And I'm like, oh my God, I guess I didn't realize that. And so now kind of the monster in the bed for me is, okay, I'm a psychiatrist now. If I'm, I know it's going to sound a little nuts, but I'm going to go and tell you anyway. Like if I'm sitting there at 80 years old and I think about this mental health crisis and I haven't at least tried to move the needle on it, I won't feel very good about myself. And I know I've gotten better at giving myself grace, but I feel like that's the kind of the challenge now is like, I feel like this mental health crisis is kind of gone beyond being a crisis. It's really kind of a chronic problem now. It's not a crisis anymore. We got a chronic problem. And I was looking back at, I think a year or two ago, the U.S. Surgeon General issued this report about, youth mental health. It's a crisis. Well, we had a Surgeon General report in 1999 that had another that also said we have a mental health crisis. Well, are we just going to keep issuing reports, or are we going to change things? And that's I guess what I don't have a ton of patience for is kind of people hemming and hawing and wringing their hands and having committees and task forces about mental health crisis. And I don't have any more patience for that, because it times time's up. Like it's time to do something now. And so that's kind of what's pushed me along, I would say, since I discovered all the problems we're facing, especially in this part of the country. And so, yeah, when I was at Billings Clinic, I did a bunch of things to try to move the needle, and certainly doing what I'm doing now is hopefully an attempt to make a difference as well.
Well, and like we talked about a little bit before, if doctors aren't in the room, if doctors aren't in the decision-making capacity on some of these things, it's hard to have it really change, because, if we have policymakers who don't have background in mental health, for example, on this issue, and you don't have physicians on the leadership of that, or actually leading these organizations, it becomes a misdirect, and there's lots of money and lots of resources that get funneled to things that really don't make much of a difference. But those of us that treat patients on a day-by-day basis, that there's so many social determinants of health, access to medications, access to counseling, family dynamics, access to drugs and alcohol, and so many things that kind of inform this issue. And so I love what you're doing, and it's part of my lived experience every day to watch this, day in and day out. And you love the kids, but and they go through it. We all go through, for whatever reasons, our developmental process. We all have to go through this adolescent stage and then our young adult years, and it's just chaos between about age 14 to 24.
Yep.
And we have to all do it, but if we don't teach the next generation to navigate that well, then we haven't really done a good job. And for whatever reason, in our modern era, we've got that particular group of people. A lot of them really struggle. So I love to hear that you're working on it. I'm interested to hear more about what you're doing with your current efforts on that.
Sure. And if I might, maybe just a little bit of I might circle back real quick to the work I did at Billings Clinic. Again, I think, is that and I love spending, like, I've been on a couple different podcasts. I love actually being on a podcast with a doctor, because I feel like, all right, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah,
like
we do this day in and day out.
Right. So where I've been, where I'm at now, and where I'm going. Right. So we're kind of on the same page there. So when I was at Billings Clinic, I think having done, so I started med school in 2003. So I was 34 years old, and that was a little odd because I was older than some of the attendings, and certainly older than I think I was like the second oldest in the class of 100. And so I felt there was a time where I felt bad about that, because I felt like, I'm starting my career late. I have a disadvantage of time and resources because, I'm taking on this debt late, and I have kids and all that stuff. Now reflecting back, I feel really lucky that I did that, only because I ended up picking up a lot of other life experience and skills that I think shaped me to think differently, and maybe be and at least for me, I feel more comfortable thinking about the big picture and kind of looking at what are all the levers of change we have in society to move the needle on some of these public health problems that we've sort of been alluding to. So, like when I was actually when I was doing my adult residency at Yale, I got in trouble because I don't know. There's this one guy who would teach. He was teaching class, and the guy just kept getting lost in all these receptors and new potential new medications, and which, again, it's interesting, but it's really more trivia in my mind. At the same time, a block or two down the road, there were dozens of people waiting in the emergency room because they were suicidal, and I'm wondering, like, what are we doing about that? Like right now, we have tools to help people. You're sitting here telling me for 2 hours about this new receptor that was discovered, and we got people down the block that are suffering. So that was something that was hard for me to hold. And so I would skip that class and I'd be up at Hartford, which is the capital of Connecticut, like looking to advocate and testify because of what I was seeing in the emergency room. Like I couldn't let go of that. And so I started really early on and and recognized very quickly that for us doctors to make a difference, even though, yes, trust in medicine and science and doctors is kind of, it's not on an upswing right now, but still we are among the most trusted professionals. I recognize and realize that if we just show up and, like you were alluding to, like show up in the right places, people will listen because we're the ones who actually hold a lot of the information and the knowledge and the know-how about how to move the needle on some really important things in society. And so early on, I discovered that. So anyway, fast forward, I get to Montana. I learn about the problems, really facing states like Montana, Idaho. And one of the biggest problems is the shortage of psychiatrists. And Idaho, I think, is actually ranks the lowest in terms of,
right.
in terms of access to psychiatrists in the state. And so I was having trouble recruiting at Billings Clinic, trying to bring psychiatrists into Montana. And so the CEO at the time, who was brilliant and a real visionary, he challenged me it was like a senior leadership meeting. It was, Eric, if you can't recruit people, why don't you just start a residency? And I said, okay. So I said, all right. So I said, everybody has witness here, right? I'm going to start residency. They're like, okay. So I did. So I reached out to the University of Washington because the University of Washington has already by that time had a couple of rural tracks. So basically what happened is 4-year psychiatry residency was split up into 2 years in Seattle and 2 years in a rural setting. Idaho has a track and Eastern Washington had a track at the time. And so I worked with the University of Washington to create a Montana track and took a couple of years. I had to go to the legislature in Montana to try and get funding, got funding from like Blue Cross and a couple of other payers because Medicare didn't have any more spots available to fund residencies. And so we had to get creative about funding. But again, I go back to my sort of experience doing other things in life that made me feel comfortable to get in a room and ask for money and educate and testify and advocate, right? And so I was able to pull that off and get a psychiatry residency. And so now, Montana has a psychiatry residency. Now it's a 4-year residency. After I left Billings Clinic, they converted it from a 2-year track with the University of Washington to a full 4-year residency. And now I think the Billings Clinic has trained maybe 9 or 12 psychiatrists and, half of which have stayed in the region, which is great.
Oh, yeah.
And then, so that was really cool. And then the other thing, I started, Billings Clinic was getting about 15 to 20 patients in the psychiatric crisis per day, coming from northern Wyoming, all of Montana, and some of the western Dakotas. And, patients were waiting 10, 12, 20 hours to be seen, which I thought was just reprehensible. It's just not okay. And so, again, talking to leadership, by that point, people knew I had weird ideas, or at least I borrowed other people's ideas. That's what I did a lot. I borrowed other people's ideas. I didn't do much original, but I stole stuff and used it. And so there's something called an empath unit, which is a type of a psychiatric stabilization unit that has been around for almost 20 years and actually is incredibly powerful as an intervention to help emergency rooms and most importantly, help patients really to get best care in crisis. So we built one. at Billings Clinic, and we got the wait time down to less than 4 hours per patient to be seen by psychiatry. So again, I'm bringing that up only because I have this thing where, like, I see something not great happening in the continuum of care in psychiatry. It bothers me, and I want to fix it. And so I'll beg, borrow, and steal to figure out how to do it. And that's what I did at Billings Clinic. And so in 2019, you know, I recognized that I still had patients who were driving 4 hours to come see me for a half-hour visit. I'm good, but I'm not that good where you need to be driving 4 hours to see me. And so, and telemedicine was around, and the technology had been advancing, right? By then you had webcams that were pretty cheap. Zoom was around. I'm like, we got to do telemedicine. And so I really pushed the system to push Billings Clinic to really lean in further to telemedicine and for psychiatry. And, at that point, they had other priorities. And so I said, you know what, I'm going to go do this. So I left and started Frontier Psychiatry, and kind of did it with another friend of mine from Seattle. And 2020, we launched it, like, I think the same month that COVID hit. And it was bizarre timing, obviously, but yeah, it was needed, and it became a really important service for a lot of people. So yeah. So anyway, sorry, I went on
No,
and on and on, but
no, it's good. Like if you think about it, there's kind of a theme threaded through all this here, Eric. You see a problem, you want to fix it, you take action, and I think all of us can do it. And like, there's just not that many physicians in the United States, really. When you kind of look relative to the population, or even in the world, when you look relative to the population of the world, and so you really do carry a lot of influence if you're willing to step outside your comfort zone, work with other visionary people, even those who are not physicians, and you have to kind of surround yourself with a team, and then you can do some amazing stuff. I've really enjoyed seeing some of those things happen in my state. In Idaho, they're trying to kind of build up some of these programs, and the fact that you're doing that, starting a residency and working in the clinic, and now getting this telemedicine thing, I'm assuming that's helping lots and lots of people as they come to your service. Do you do it all by yourself, or do you have a bunch of other psychiatrists or advanced practice providers, or how do you set that up?
sure. So yeah, when we first started, it was just a couple of us, just me and another psychiatrist. Like, all right, let's try this. And thankfully, this part of the country has recognized that telemedicine is important. So the regulations and the payer the reimbursement structure is pretty favorable for telemedicine. Thankfully, some smaller states haven't figured that out yet. But anyway, so yeah, we started. It was just a couple of us, and slowly kind of grew word of mouth, especially during COVID. We were available as an option, because a lot of health systems, as you might remember, were really struggling to figure out, all right, what do I do for telemedicine? What platform should we use? What camera should we? I mean, it really, people struggled to kind of pick up on it. So being small, we were pretty nimble, and we grew. And so today, so far, we've taken care of, I think, 25,000 patients. Right now, we see about over 4,000 patients a month. And right now, most of those, over half of those are in Montana. The rest spread between Idaho and Alaska. And we only started seeing patients in Idaho and Alaska last year, but we have 30 providers. Half of them are psychiatrists, and we have a mix of child psychiatry, addiction psychiatry, geriatric psychiatry, and perinatal psychiatry. So what we decided to do was, we wanted to be, I didn't want to be jack of all trades in mental health. Like, I didn't want to kind of be everything to everybody. I wanted to be great at one thing, and that was psychiatry, the medical side of mental health, right? Which includes, and people might not realize it, because I think, again, we've done a really bad job in behavioral health of splitting things up. Like, substance use disorders and mental health problems, they should be all in the same place. They should be taken care of in the same place. Like, splitting those off doesn't make any sense. So we decided we want to be great at psychiatry and make it easy to access and easy to deliver. And so to that end, we hired, great psychiatrists, as well as some advanced practice providers. So we have, again, half and half. Half are psychiatrists, board certified psychiatrists. The other half are a mix of nurse practitioners and PAs. And it's been very rewarding. I mean, we have some, thankfully, really great people. And what's cool about, I get to form, I'm captain of the team, and I get to form my own team, and I get to keep who's really good. And if somebody's not cutting it. I'm sure there are other places that they can go to, but what's really important to the team that we put together is I want them to really, really care about serving really being mission aligned. So they care about serving people who are underserved communities who really need help. I need them to be team players. I can't, I need people to be able to rely on each other. And because again, medicine is a team sport. We have weekly rounds that we ask clinical questions, we ask systems questions, we support each other. So really working hard, because again, healthcare can be isolating, especially when it's remote work. And a lot of health systems really have really bad workplace cultures.
Yeah.
It just is. I mean, I've experienced it in a lot of different organizations, and we're not very good at creating healthy workplace cultures. And so, to me, it was a huge priority to create a workplace culture where people were excited to go work on Monday morning and feel inspired about the mission and feel like we're moving the needle. So yeah. Anyway, that was probably a longer answer than you wanted, but hopefully that gives you a little bit of an idea of kind of the scope. And actually, one more other thing I'll add is like in 2023, we actually did raise some outside money. So we took on a minority investor to help us advance the mission. Like if I wanted to kind of bootstrap this thing as a little private practice, there's no way I would be able to be serving the people that we're serving right now. There's
Right,
no
because it
way
takes
I would
capital to build all this and hire the people and get the infrastructure. Yeah.
Exactly. And there's a lot of people kind of saying, well, having investors in healthcare, you shouldn't. Well, you can't generalize, right? Because we've had a nonprofit system of healthcare for decades and decades, and look how that's turning out, right? And so, if having investors isn't the solution to everything, I'm not saying that either. But all I can say is, for our case in particular, if we didn't have investors on board, I would not be able to have a big team the way we have now, serving all the patients we're serving now, and being able to invest in really the technology and infrastructure to be able to deliver that care in an efficient way. And so I feel lucky, and I feel like so far it's been a blessing. Again, you never know how it's going to turn out, but I just don't see any other way to really do this in a way that's sustainable and efficient.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to just kind of pick your brain on a couple of things. First of all, what's the difference? What have you noticed the difference between in-person meetings versus kind of transitioning most of your practice to telemedicine? And then what would you tell somebody else, another physician, whether they're psychiatry or other specialty, who's considering either starting something in telemedicine on their own with their own company or joining a telemedicine company? You went through this transition, and I think that's you've done it for enough years, and it'd be interesting to kind of hear your thoughts on that.
Sure. So a couple of things. Like, first of all, innovation in medicine is, I think, as you well know, a lot of people in healthcare struggle to embrace change and innovation. Not everybody, but some do. And so, there was actually initially some resistance before COVID. People thought it was a silly idea, and gosh, people prefer in-person care. One of the things is I encourage us physicians to think about is, let's stop thinking about what makes us anxious, right? Let's think about the patient. Like, think about the mom who has to take day off from work, pull a kid out of school, and then drive for 4 hours for an appointment. Think about that person when she's comparing in-person versus telemedicine, right? Because a lot of psychiatrists used to tell me, well, it's not the same. You can't do it. It's not the same quality of care. Well, number one, let's not compare in-person care to telemedicine care. Let's compare telemedicine care to no alternative at all.
Right.
That's how we need to be thinking about
that's
that.
The reality where we're at. Yeah.
Exactly. Especially places where we live. So I think that's important. Make sure whatever you're doing and how you think about it is very patient-centered, not us-centered, right? And so think about the problems you're trying to solve. And so when it comes to telemedicine, I can tell you the pros and cons. So in terms of the pros, it's been widely embraced now. There's plenty of research to show that it helps and it moves the needle and it helps people. Like, we actually did a study. We're about to actually publish a study next month. I'll send it to you once it's published. That by doing this telemedicine work in Montana Medicaid patients, actually, the patients that we took care of got hospitalized at a rate 30% lower than people who got other care. And I guess I'm just saying that to show that this works, right? So now, is it always easy? No. Like, would I prefer to have like a team of people around me in person? Yeah, because this work can be isolating. Like,
Right.
working out of my own office or home office, I get lonely. I get cabin fever, right? And I want to see people around me. So there are moments I really miss that. I remember working in emergency rooms with other people around me, the action, the adrenaline, and really being able to kind of go from patient to patient very quickly and helping people I love it and it's rewarding. So I'm not saying that telemedicine is somehow, kind of this panacea that is perfect. No, not at all. But I'm thinking about it as how do we best get access to quality care to the patient, right? Why should somebody in small town Idaho get care that's inferior to somebody who lives down the block from the University of Washington in Seattle? Like, I don't see that's okay. Like, that doesn't make any sense to me. So I guess the first part of your answer to your question is, I guess the frame of mind that you kind of need to adapt, I think, to doing something like this. I want to make sure it's very patient centered in how we're thinking about it. And then you think about if you want to start your own thing, it's complicated, but it's doable. It's not as complicated as people think it is. Because I know, again, and sadly, in medical training, we're never taught to do any of this stuff. Like, we're not taught how to start an LLC or a professional LLC. We're not taught how billing and coding works, and it's really, really unfortunate, because I think that hamstrings a lot of doctors who could be doing really cool things, and they feel probably overly intimidated by what it takes to do it. It's hard, but it's not as hard as people think. And so I would encourage, and yeah, does it take some risk? Sure. But without kind of risk, you're not going to get the reward I think that we often deserve. But if you plan on working for a larger organization that already does telemedicine, man, if there's anything I learned both in medicine and outside of medicine, is the number one most important thing is the workplace culture. Because you could have an organization that has these beautiful flags outside that tells you what the mission is, but if the leaders aren't walking the walk, it's going to be a mess and you're going to hate your job. And so I would encourage people to, yeah, salary and benefits are important, but I would say number one is the culture, the workplace culture, and are people really, really, really walking that walk on the inside of the organization? And if they are, then you're likely in the right place. So that in my mind is hands down the most important thing.
Yeah, no, I love that. You think about mission first, and I think in some ways in medical training, I've talked to other people who've had a military background, and there's some kind of similar mission-driven, mission-focused above all, and some doctors get a little bit lost in that, like, hey, my priorities everything else doesn't matter, only my priority matters, because the patient comes first and mission-driven first. But we do have to kind of work as part of a team. And then, but at the same time, when you go into something like that, it's pretty important to say, okay, is the mission actually reflected in the decisions we make and the way we talk about our patients and about our colleagues? Do we see past the weak moments and look forward to the better moment? Because sometimes people get lost in the weeds on things that don't really matter. But if you're a really culture-driven organization, you'll see past that and say, okay, this was a speed bump. It's not slowing us down all the way.
That's exactly right. You're going to learn how to have grace with yourself, grace with those around you, and keep your eye on the big picture. What for me is, like, again, I'm learning. Again, it took me a long time and lots of mistakes, many mistakes, and sitting through really useless meetings to learn. Like if you're in a healthcare organization, and number one, you're in way too many meetings, and it's probably a waste of time. Number one. Number two. And that means people just haven't figured out how to be efficient. But the other thing is, if you're sitting in meetings and people rarely talk about how to help our patients, and we got a problem, right? Because
Right.
if you're sitting there talking about, stupid politics, or I'm talking like internal cultural politics, or building that new building, or having just turf wars, like it just. And you keep forgetting to talk about the patient. Like, in my mind, if you're not starting off with the patient in a meeting in a healthcare organization, that's a symptom of a bigger problem. And
Yep.
so I would just, at least for me, when I started finding myself being in situations like that, it was untenable to me, because I started to feel more and more and more and more removed from the problem and solving the problem. So I just can't sit with that, and I just got to move on. And so and hopefully And I think, knock on wood, the team that we've put together are the people, hopefully, that I think are aligned with that sort of thinking. Is like, let's not spin our wheels and waste time and mean like, let's go out there and solve problems. And again, we're not perfect. We have a lot of things I can improve about the way we do our work and operational efficiency and culture for sure. But again, kind of going back to the comment you made is, if people, I guess me as the CEO of this organization, if people see me trying and they know that I'm trying, and they'll give me grace because they'll know that I'm trying and I'm not going to get it right all the time. And hopefully I have the confidence in myself to be vulnerable enough to say, you know what, I screwed up, my bad. Here's where I screwed up. Here's how I'm going to fix it. Let's move on. But the mission hasn't changed.
Yeah, mission has to stay the same. Well, do you have any stories you can share with us? I know all of us have to be careful with HIPAA and not give anything, but I would like to hear if there's any, there's times where you make a big difference or a big impact on a person or your organization, help somebody that was like, man, that was a situation that would have gone so badly if we hadn't been there. I'm interested if you have any stories over the course of your career that you could share, something where you made kind of a big difference in somebody's life with this training, because you left Wall Street and with the idea that you were going to make this impact. And I'm curious if there's any stories where that's happened.
Oh, sure. I mean,
I'm sure there's thousands, but.
Oh, I got thousands of stories. No. And, when and I think anybody who tries to be successful is always feeling a little bit insecure, right? So I wake up every day thinking I haven't done enough. And I know it sounds silly, but when I'm in my own head, like that's kind of what keeps me going to keep trying to do more and more. But if I'm being kind to myself and reflecting back, I look back in some of the things I told you about, like the residency. We've trained a bunch of new people who are now delivering psychiatric care in the region for the first time. We created a psychiatric stabilization unit that is providing thousands of people with hopefully help and relief during a crisis. And now I think we've done well over 100,000 telemedicine visits since we started. And so those are kind of some big picture things I think about. But there's there are a couple of stories, but one in particular I think might be entertaining, might be more entertaining than. But no, I think it'll give you a vibe for kind of how I kind of handle certain situations, both good and bad. So it's 2018. I'm at Billings Clinic. It's the first day that we opened this empath unit, this psychiatric stabilization unit. And basically, and people who don't know about it should read about it. So it's empath, which stands for Emergency Psychiatric Assessment, Treatment, and Healing Unit. It's a beautiful model. It's getting traction now, finally. So lots of states, and it's often listed in SAMHSA's best practices for emergency psychiatric care. Anyway, so we open it. It's I think it's like spring of 2018, and doors open. And again, remember I told you on average, we're seeing around probably about 15 patients in crisis every day. Sometimes it would be 10, sometimes it'd be 20. So we opened this with not a ton of fanfare because I didn't know how well it was going to work. The day we opened, we ended up with, I think, 35 patients in crisis who came from Wyoming, all Montana, the Western Dakotas. And I was the only provider with a small team in this unit. And because, again, a lot of people were kind of scared of this new unit going, we've never done it this way. It's because basically what it is like a big living room with these very comfortable chairs. We put people in a comfortable, low stimulation environment that provide better supportive care for people in crisis. And so they're like, Eric, you do this. This is your project. I'm like, all right, fine, I'll do it. So that day we had over 30 patients show up in crisis. It's me and a small team. I'm like, oh my goodness.
Well, you're way more than your average. 15 is your average. And suddenly you're way, way over that.
Way more. So within an hour of this thing opening, I said to the team, and I called the emergency room, and I said, we're shutting down the unit for an hour. They're like, what? What are you doing? Wait, I'm like, no, we're shutting this down for an hour. So I went into my car, I got on my cell phone, and I called a guy named Scott Zeller. So Scott is kind of the godfather of this unit. He's the one who came up with the idea. He started it in the early 2000s in California, and he kind of mentored me through the opening of this unit. And I called him. I go, Scott, what do I do? I was
yeah, you're overwhelmed.
I'm overwhelmed. Like this is my first day. I was hoping to kind of ease into it to figure out what the perfect or the right clinical workflow should be. And he, we spent like a half hour on the phone. We went through a bunch of different scenarios. He gave me some advice. Went back. We opened back the unit, and everybody was like, "Arzubi, where were you?" I'm like, "I was talking to a friend." So we opened it up, and we made it through the day, and patients got, I think, good care, and we helped a lot of patients. And ultimately, that unit, we ended up again reducing the wait time by a lot for patients who were in crisis. We reduced admission rates to the psychiatric hospital, and we reduced readmission rates by a lot. And so, so I'm really, I don't know, feel very proud of having survived that. But I think that story gives you a little window into, and moments like that happen way more often than I will probably admit, unless I'm talking to a doctor on a podcast.
Well, no, but like all of us, I mean, anybody that's worked in medicine, you've all had, whether in training or in, I mean, I know for sure in my practice, it happens all the time. You're just in overload, overwhelm, and you're like, okay. So if you were able to take a break and kind of phone a friend and get some support, that's pretty cool. It's part of medicine though. Like you're going to have, in hindsight, you can look back and like, oh yeah, that all worked. But in the middle of it, you're like, oh boy. That's why.
I thought people were going to get hurt. I thought this was a failure. I mean, I catastrophize. Like I'm really good at that. And so I'm like, all right, how do I put myself out of this? And I know I can't do it alone. And I think maybe that's, again, kind of like you and I have been alluding to. I mean, it's a team sport. You cannot do this alone. And if anybody thinks they have all the answers, that's kind of a problem, because I mean, I think in my mind, the best doctors, the best clinicians, best leaders, are the ones who know damn well they don't have all the solutions.
No, you got to have work with the team. But did you say you had a second story?
Oh, I got plenty of stories. No, I mean, that was the kind of the one story I was thinking about. I think that's the main story. I mean, I don't know how much time you have for stories.
Oh no, I for a minute I thought you said you had two stories, so I just want to make sure.
No, that was kind of the main one, which I think was a really nice little snapshot in time to give a taste of what it's like to do some of this stuff.
Well, and it's real. So Eric, one of the things I've really enjoyed about our conversation is just it's just like your real lived experience. You know, you're just this young man and you go to Argentina and it didn't work because you chased the girlfriend, and then you get this real experience of like you're not real fascinated. You love the work in Wall Street, but it's not really mission driven and giving you that level of passion. So you left and went to tutor middle schoolers and go retake a bunch of undergrad courses. I mean, and then you started a residency because you didn't have enough psychiatrists. And then you decided, well, there's not enough access for all these people, so we're going to start a telemedicine company. So I'm fascinated to see what you do next, because you'll look back on this. I'm confident when you look back on this, you'll say, yep, did I make an impact? Yeah. And did I make a difference that is going to leave a long-lasting legacy where other people will have their lives benefited by the work I did in my life? Yeah. And I hope we can all say that to some degree. But it's nice to actually put this in action. And I think that's why this is such a unique story, because it's easy to get into the same job and see the same patients and do the same thing and let somebody else make all the decisions and make all the financial decisions. But you have to be a bit of a risk taker, kind of an entrepreneur, like I can tell you are. But it's pretty cool. It's awesome that you've been able to actually do it.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. It's nice. And I do appreciate, actually, I enjoy this interview a lot. Again, having a conversation like that with a fellow physician is very different than another podcast host. And I think I'll tell you, it hit me differently, and reflecting with you on it and hearing you kind of summarize that way actually hit me pretty hard. So I thank you for that. And and I guess I wish for us doctors to find really meaning what we do, and to keep the curiosity, the awe, the wonder about medicine that we had when we first started, to keep that alive, and know that a lot more is possible than we think it is. But we just got to think outside the box and outside the system. And yeah, it's hard, but I can tell you those moments, like that day we opened that unit, was it scary? Sure. But gosh, looking back and knowing that thousands of people got hopefully better care it's a wonderful feeling. So I guess what I hope for is, can we find ways to scale our impact. And maybe that's kind of one challenge I throw out to people who are listening is think about what you do every day, think about the good work you do, and think about how can you scale your impact. Does that mean scaling, mentoring other people? Does it mean doing work like you're doing right now, Peter, on this podcast? What are the ways you can scale your impact on your community and on the world? And I don't know. I think that'll feed people in a way that's different and hopefully healthy.
I think so too. I that's what I'm going to take from this, Eric, is just kind of a motivation to scale your impact. I like that. It's a good way to think about it. What can I do today? Because I've got the patient it's in front of me. But what can I do to scale this impact so it impacts others who aren't in front of me, who need to be in front of me? Or what can I do to help influence other physicians or other people in the healthcare team that I'm working with? Because it does have an impact, and it really kind of ripples out as you provide that impact. And so this story has been awesome, Eric. I really appreciate you taking the time to do this. I have found a lot of motivation from this, and I'm confident others will really enjoy hearing this interview.
Thanks, Peter. I really appreciate you reaching out, connecting, and yeah, love this talk. And hopefully, maybe down the road we'll do it again, and
Oh yeah.
and it'll be just as fun.
Oh yeah. Keep in touch, Eric. Thank you so much.
We'll do. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for tuning into the Doctors Making a Difference podcast. And thank you for what you do to help your patients and your community. Your work truly helps so many people. We produce this content to help you have the tools you need to stay in medicine and to highlight the amazing work being done by physicians around the world. Please note that while I am a physician, and many of the guests on this program are also physicians or other professionals, the discussions on this podcast do not represent my employer or any professional organizations to which I belong. This podcast is for your information and entertainment only, and should not be taken as professional advice. You should seek appropriate professional advice pertaining to your own situation. Please check out more of our content on our website, doctorsmakingadifference.com. Also, please follow, like, or subscribe on your podcast player or YouTube channel, and give us a 5-star rating. It really helps to spread the message. Finally, if you'd like to be a guest on the podcast, or if you'd like to nominate someone else to be a guest, please visit the website or email admin@doctorsmakingadifference.com. See you next time.